Hey Trailblazers. Hoyoverse decided to cosplay as Oprah this patch and gave everyone a free copy of drratio. This is super generous because he's arguably the strongest single target damage dealer in the game. In this video, I want to show you guys how you can build your drratio. Instead of just telling you what to do, I'm going to build up my drratio from ground up and go through my thought process. I also have a fun team comp showcase after the build guide. Drratio is a damage dealer and carry, so you want to level him up to level 80, and same with his light cone. Levels matter a lot because you want to have the highest base stats for his gear to scale off of, and the damage formula cares about the level difference between your character and the enemy. For his light cones, I decided to pull for his signature light cone. Unfortunately, Hunt doesn't have great light cone options. According to theory crafting that I looked at, his light cone is 20% stronger than Cruising Stellar Sea, which is the best free to play option. 20% is a lot, and that's why I decided to pull for it. The second best light cone for him is Topaz's light cone, which I'm guessing if you have it, you're using it for Topaz. For his traces, you want to pick up all his major traces and stat upgrades. His talent trace is by far the most important because that's his follow-up attack damage multiplier, and his entire kit is based around that. I decided to prioritize his skill a little bit more than his ultimate because he uses his skill more often. If you really want to invest in him, you would go to level 10 on everything, but you can get away with just level 10 on his talent and level 8 on his skill and ult. After doing his traces, we get to Relics, which is both the rewarding and difficult part about building a character. It's rewarding and fun to see your drratio slowly become a monster, but finding the right combination of relics can be challenging. Theoretically, the best set for drratio is the Wastelander set. The 4-piece effect is very strong, but at the same time, it's not worth it if your substats are bad. This is why you see me looking at 4 different relic sets to see what are the best options that are in my possession. Drratio is your typical attack and crit damage dealer, but he also uses follow-up attacks. So that's why I'm looking at the Musketeer set, the Grand Duke set, the Wastelander set, and even the Speed set. He doesn't need to be super fast, but because his damage profile is single target, he needs to be able to switch targets quickly, and that's why I recommend speed boots. Something I want to highlight about my process is that I use the filter and sort options a lot. It makes finding useful pieces way faster and easier than scrolling and clicking. When I'm building my characters, I always start off with the chest and boots. Crit and speed main stats are more rare, so they're often the limiting factor to what relic sets you can use. For my drratio, I have a really good crit damage chest from the Archduke set, and a really good speed boot from the Musketeer set, and that's why I ultimately decided to use the 2-piece Musketeer and 2-piece Archduke combo. For the Ornament relic set, I went with Inert Salsado for the follow-up attack damage bonus. The new Galmeth set is also viable, but I don't like the speed requirement. Between Salsado and Galmeth, use the one with the better substats. For the main stat of the orb, both attack and imaginary damage work. Again, pick the one with the better substats. If things are equal, I actually prefer attack orb on drratio because he already gets a lot of increased damage buffs from his A6 trace, signature light cone, and relic set bonuses. Think of maximizing damage like maximizing the area of a rectangle. You want a balance between attack and damage buffs. If you run drratio with Run May, attack orb is better than imaginary damage orb because Run May provides a huge amount of damage buffs but no attack buffs. And lastly, you want to use attack for the main stat on the rope. And that about wraps up my build for drratio. Of course, I had a lot of relics and materials pre-farmed. There's definitely space for future improvements, especially with my ornament sets. They're pretty weak. I gotta say, I'm pretty satisfied with my drratio after day 1. 3,100 attack, 70% crit rate, 185 crit damage. That's pretty good for a day 1 build. Now we just gotta test him out. Let's take him to MOC and see how he does. The obvious place to test drratio is in MOC12 Side 1. I'm running a non-sustained comp with Welt, Tingyun, and Run May. The reason this comp works is that Tingyun allows Welt to immediately ult at the start of the fight. This applies all the debuffs that drratio needs to do big damage, and it also delays the enemies. Combined with Run May's ult, the enemies are barely attacking. However, I wouldn't recommend this comp if your characters are not super well built. If the enemies don't die during their extended weakness broken state, your characters start dying and then the comp falls apart. But still, it's really fun seeing all the characters synergize and combo. You can see in this fight drratio doing massive 100k follow-up attacks. I don't want to gas up ratio too much though. He's good, but he's also hard to play. You need to be really careful about who to target with the skill and who you want to set up for his ult to finish. Imbiber de Lune does comparable damage and is way easier to play. MOC in this meta still favors blast damage over single target damage. drratio also has pretty strict team comp requirements. He does not function in a regular double harmony hypercarry team. He requires a debuffer on his team, and ideally that debuffer is fast and goes before ratio to set up the enemies. In this particular team comp, if I were to replace any of the supports with a healer, the team just feels so much worse, because drratio requires both a lot of buffs and a lot of debuffs. And this is why Topaz is just so good for him, and by far the best support for drratio, because Topaz can both debuff the enemies, buff drratio's damage, and also serve as a second carry. I haven't built my Gwynifen yet, but I'm really curious to see how she performs with drratio. She could end up being a budget Topaz. If you discovered any really cool drratio team comps, leave a comment down below. I hope you enjoyed watching this guide. I have my builds at the end of this video. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.